On the northeast coast of England, in the county of Yorkshire, stands the coastal town of Whitby, the starting point for our journey on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. British Rail sprinters run a regular service into Whitby, which lies at the eastern end of the picturesque Esk Valley line. The town is dominated by its cliff-top abbey, which was built in 1220 on the site of an Anglo-Saxon monastery. The abbey was closed in 1539 by Henry VIII and soon fell to ruin. The Church of St. Mary's has been built in recent times alongside the old abbey. The soft sandstone used for gravestones in this cliff-top graveyard bear the scars of many years' erosion by the weather, which can be particularly harsh on this coastline. These huge whale jaw bones, erected here in 1963, are a reminder of the town's past links with the whaling industry. Captain James Cook is amongst the many famous connections Whitby has with the sea, along with Captain Scoresby, the most successful and daring of all captains involved in the whale fishing industry, and the inventor of the crow's nest. Between the years 1753 and 1833, over 50 sailing ships from Whitby were engaged in whaling activities. Over 2,500 whales were brought back to the port, where great boiler houses on the harbour side rendered the blubber into oil. Today, the sheltered harbour is home mainly to pleasure craft and small fishing boats, which convey visitors on day-long fishing trips. Lobster pots, piled high on the quayside, hint at the fishing industry that once existed in the town. Across the harbour, modern freighters are unloaded. The town itself is typical of any small port. The houses crowding together in narrow back streets, almost touching in places across the narrow passageways. Evidence of the local fishing industry can be found in the small collection of fishmongers, whilst other shops cater more for the newer industry of tourism. Cobbled streets lead the way to the abbey, the stone steps worn by centuries of use. Whitby also boasts fine beaches at the foot of sloping cliffs to the west of the harbour. Turning our attention to railway matters, Whitby was once an important station. The now closed East Coast Line served the town. The station, seen here in its heyday, has since been reduced to single line. The only surviving section of British Rail runs through Grosmont, where the North Yorkshire Moors line to Pickering begins. In the yard, the day's preparations are well underway. Polishing, coaling and oiling are all essential points in the preparation of a steam locomotive for its day's work. Lambton Tank number 5, resplendent in its shiny black livery, moves off to begin its daily duties. Amidst clouds of steam, British Railways Standard Class 4MT number 80135, one of the largest tank engines in the British Railways standard range, manoeuvres through the points to take up its position in the day's timetable. Because of the length of the line, at 18 miles, it's possible for the railway to operate 3 trains on the line at any one time. This involves sending a light engine to Pickering every morning to collect its rake of coaches and begin its timetable from there. Today, this duty falls to War Department class number 3672, Dame Vera Lynn, a 210 tender locomotive. The design was conceived by R.A. Ruddles in the early days of World War II. Many saw service on the UK mainland before being dispatched to the continent to assist in the liberation of Europe. As number 73672, this locomotive was one of a batch of 16 delivered to the British military authorities in Egypt in 1944. By 1946, it had been sold to the Greek Railways and was used on mainline duties until 1967, when it was displaced by diesel power. Repatriated in 1984 and named Dame Vera Lynn in 1985, the locomotive finally arrived at Grosmont in December 1986. After extensive boiler repairs, number 3672 returned to regular service duties early in 1989. Part of the regular maintenance and upkeep of any railway involves cleaning weeds from the trackbed that can affect drainage and control of the ballast supporting the sleepers. This job can easily be achieved on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. At Grosmont, the link with British Rail allows trains to run from the main line onto the private line. Today, the British Rail weed-killing train, which sprays the trackbed quickly and efficiently with a powerful weed killer, is visiting the line. Grosmont, Lambton Tank number 5 exits the tunnel which connects the locomotive sheds with Grosmont Station. Built in 1905 by Robert Stevenson for Lambton, Eton and Joycey collieries, number 5 spent all its working life hauling transfer coal trains over the colliery main lines in that part of Durham. In 1970, following the fitting of vacuum brake and steam heating equipment, the locomotive was delivered to the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. Apart from a major overhaul in 1986, number 5 has seen regular service on the line since its delivery. When the line was opened in 1836, the industrial village at Grosmont was established, with a population of over 1,500, most of the workforce being employed in the ironworks. The name Grosmont comes from the word Grandimont, the name of the mother church in Normandy from where monks came to found a priory in 1204. The station at Grosmont has 3 lines, all of which have to cross the road. 2 sets of crossing gates had to be used, providing an unusual feature for the station. Number 80135 reverses into one of the other platforms to collect its coaches. Departing from the platform, number 5 slips as the powerful locomotive fights for adhesion. The Merck-esque river is crossed before the trains plunge into the 120-yard-long tunnel, emerging alongside the locomotive sheds. As the climb towards Goathland begins, both fireman and driver work hard to maintain a steady speed. The 24 cottages at Esk Valley were built in 1870 and rented to ironworkers for the equivalent of 12.5 pence per week. The hamlet relied on a fortnightly train to supply them with coal and provisions until 1951. Regular track maintenance work can be carried out by the railway's own workforce during normal service hours. Higher up the climb, above Esk Valley, workmen are replacing new sleepers for old. At the sound of the approaching train, the workers stepped safely aside to allow number 5 to pass. The Merck Esk is crossed 3 times in half a mile. In places, there's an almost sheer drop of 100 feet to the valley floor. At Darnholm, sleepy meadows next to the river provide an ideal picnic spot. The gradient between Goathland and Grosmont at 1 in 49 is one of the steepest rail gradients in Britain. It replaced the 1 in 10 rope-worked incline which hauled carriages from Beck Hole to Goathland between 1836 and 1865. Goathland Station, the first stop on our journey, and number 5 crests the climb and coasts into the platform. Grosmont to Goathland, 3.5 miles of steep climbing and a brief rest for locomotive and crew before number 5 continues on its way to Pickering. The village of Goathland is a typical North Yorkshire rural community, where sheep roam freely and the pace of life is slow and steady. Goathland Station has changed little since it was opened on the 1st of July, 1865. A relic on the station platform bears the inscription, "Original Sleeper and Chair, as used by George Stephenson in 1836. The design of the station was standard to the North Eastern Railways in the 1860s. There are several identical stations on the British Rail Esk Valley line between Whitby and Middlesbrough. The presence of this fearsome-looking snowplough tells of the harshness of the winters in this region. Before we continue our journey, there are a number of interesting features on the next section of line between Goathland and Newtondale that are worthy of note. A mile past Goathland at Moorgates, the original 1836 route diverges. The remains of the trackbed are still visible today. The original line used a rope-worked incline between Goathland and Beck Hole. The new line, built in 1865, runs almost parallel at this point to the original line. The rails now have to cross open moorland before entering and following the Newtondale Gorge, which was formed at the end of the last ice age some 10,000 years ago. The gorge is 14 miles long and in places 400 feet deep. On the highest point of this moorland stands the three 150 feet high radomes of Fylingdales. The huge fiberglass covers protect the highly sensitive ballistic missile early warning system that's been looking 3,000 miles into space 24 hours a day since 1964. 9,000 years ago, this area was dense woodland. When the trees died out, they formed this area of peat bog known today as Fen Bog. The peat is over 38 feet deep and caused the railway builders many problems. Stephenson sank brushwood, timber, and even sheep fleece filled with heather to produce a firm foundation. Today, Fen Bog is a nature reserve with a unique mixture of bog and fenland plants. The line now sweeps down into the forests surrounding Newtondale, past these ruins known as Carter's House. Southern Railways Class S5 number 841, which spent much of its early life on parcel and freight trains out of Waterloo, sweeps around the long curves of the forest and past Carter's House ruin. We can continue our journey now from Goathland, where the station is busy awaiting the impending arrival of number 3672 Dame Vera Lynn on a Pickering-bound train. From the train, we can clearly see the points of interest we've looked at in detail. At Moorgates, we pass the old line before crossing Fen Bog and passing Carter's House Ruin. From a high vantage point in Cropton Forest, the magnificent splendour of Newtondale is laid before us. Far below, the railway twists past Newtondale Halt. Accessible only by rail, it's an ideal stop-off point for walkers. British Railways Standard Class number 80135 coasts to a halt 9.5 miles from Grosmont and deep in Cropton Forest. After a run of just 2.5 miles through scenery which sees the forest climbing the steep walls of the gorge on either side of the line, the trains emerge from amongst the pine trees and run into Levisham station. The path and road from the station to the village of Levisham climbed 300 feet up the sides of the gorge, providing a spectacular vantage point from which to watch the trains come and go. The small community which makes up Levisham village is 1.5 miles away from the station. A short walk across the moors from here brings us to Skelton Tower. Resembling the ruins of an ancient castle keep, the tower has stood here since 1850. It was erected by the Reverend Robert Skelton to provide a quiet spot for him to write his sermons. Today, it provides one of the most famous and spectacular views of the railway. At the station, the barriers come down on the road crossing, marking the arrival of the train which will take us on the final leg of our journey to Pickering. Levisham is a regular crossing point for trains, and first to arrive is a Grosmont-bound GWR Class 56XX number 6619. Out of the forest emerges number 5, this time with a rake of blue and grey liveried coaches. 4 miles of line between Newbridge and Levisham was double track from 1845 until 1917, when one track was removed to help the war effort. The metals never reached their destination in France. The ship carrying them was torpedoed, and the track now lies deep in the English Channel. Pickering, end of the line for the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, although originally the line continued on south through Malton. The locomotives run round their coaches and take on water here for the return journey. All the signalling for Pickering Station is controlled from this signal box at Newbridge, over half a mile away. Once the locomotive is coupled up to its coaches for the return journey, the points and signals are set for its departure. When the train passes Newbridge, tokens for the section are exchanged with the signalman. Pickering itself is a busy market town, and on market day is alive with activity. High on the hill overlooking the station stands Pickering Castle, founded by William the Conqueror in the 11th century. For most of its useful life, it controlled hunting in the nearby forest and provided accommodation for the king and his relatives. Close by the station stands the Beck Isle Museum of Rural History. Here is recreated life as it used to be for the farming communities in the area. Here also is a fine collection of old farm machinery. The tour of Pickering town then completes our journey on the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. And all that remains now is to board our train, this time a wine and dine special hauled by number 3672 Dame Vera Lynn, for the return journey across time.